Hey, it is your buddy, Peace and Harmony, with you here today. Much love going out to all the beautiful, empowered harmonizers. We're zooming in and focusing in a little bit more in depth on the effects of psychopathic or narcissistic parenting on the children and how this affects their development, not only in their childhood but well into adulthood. And this is based on a tremendous amount of feedback that I got in order to sort of develop and discuss the dynamics of this relationship, because a lot of people have found that in their, I guess, in the study of the course of their current relationships, they're viewing this in light now of the fact that their parents had exhibited some personality disorders or a pathological sense of self-absorption that caused them to deny their sense of self and feel that they needed to be codependent or absent, shutting themselves sort of out, their own voice, their own sort of direction, their own personality, their own I am as a result of that. So we're going to go and focus in a little bit more in depth on that. So when we talk about parents who, and we'll talk a little bit about narcissistic and psychopathic. So when we talk really about parents who are narcissistic, they view their children in light of how they reflect back their parenting to them. And so they have a need not to develop the children, to get to know them, to find out what makes them tick, to find out where they're at developmentally and then reach them there. They keep a gap, or a sort of deficit, a disconnect between their children's needs and then really what is focused on is their needs. If their needs, particularly not only as a time-wise, but really exhibiting empathy. So, so a parent who is narcissistic doesn't really understand or even have a desire to understand where the child is coming from. Their sibling problems, their school problems, their needs to be listened, understood, have eye contact, have someone to hug them, someone to baby them while they're a child, but the parent, the narcissist parent, they don't feel comfortable putting their child in the center of things, sort of the center of attention. The parent wants to retain that privileged position in the family system for themselves. So there can only be one. And so I feel the misconception with narcissist parents is that they need to realize that there's only one mother and only one father in the family. You might have extended aunts, uncles, or older siblings who also can assist to raise the child and be there as a confidant, to be there as a trustworthy relationship that can meet them and help to guide them and help to help them over challenges. But a narcissist parent, they feel threatened by the upbringing of the child, that they might surpass the parent, that they might be more intelligent, better looking, more needy, need more attention. And so it puts a lot of pressure on the relationship with the spouse. In other words, to a narcissist parent who has an insecurity or a shaky sense of self, and really not only in the eyes of the world, but particularly in the eyes of the relationship with their spouse, they will then exert a domineering influence over that child to keep them oftentimes in a gaslighted state, meaning denying the child of their feelings, denying the child of their expression, denying the child of their truth, and oftentimes reflecting back, a sort of dissociative sense of self, meaning, you don't feel that way. You don't feel this way. That's not right to feel this way. And away you go. In other words, not allowing them to express their truth or express their anger, express their fear, express their, their own level of development. So there's a lack of communication from that child in a narcissist because they don't have empathy. They don't understand that the child has different feelings. They're expecting the child to be, as an adult. In other words, be on the same level as the parent or reflect according to the needs of the parent. In other words, whether they look like the perfect child, perfectly dressed up, they get dirt on their clothes, they get gum or candy, on their books or whatever, and then they are, punished. They are told that they, aren't, listening. Even though they're a child and they're listening, they aren't mature yet. They don't have their thoughts together. Their mind is not developed. They don't have the ability. Oftentimes, even the physical ability. They put these pressures on them at way too young an age. So a child isn't understood for being a child and then able to develop and progress through the normal developmental stages of childhood development. They miss those fundamental, Abraham Maslow hierarchy of needs, the food, and then the shelter, but then, yes, but then it is, the love, the meaning, the unconditional acceptance and positive regard, for them. They can go through fits of being neglected if they are not exemplifying the needs of the parent. In other words, I need you to be a certain way, which the child is not. They can never satisfy the expectations of that child, and so that just looms like a dark shadow or a dark cloud over the child, that they feel that they can't be in the center of attention, that they can't speak up, that they can't. And, this is a lot of negative programming, negative conditioning that the parent then surrounds the child with on an ongoing and chronic, consistent basis, where they're met with walls and they're met with resistance rather than open arms and understanding and being able to communicate to at their level. A narcissist will view the neediness of the child as an insecurity and that it takes away from their attention. So they're going to want to shut that child down, punitive measures, not giving them the attention. And so children need attention. They need this in their beginning years of life in order to get a healthy sense of self, to know who they are naturally as a wellspring of their emotions and thoughts that come up within them, and how to guide and manage, particularly, both the positive and the negative emotions, whether they're running into an issue at school or on the playground. Children need the mature perspective of their caregiver to guide them through these stages, to make sense of how to organize your studies, what to put first, how to organize your sportsmanship, how to handle relationships at school, how to go to parties, how to manage sibling rivalries, things of that nature, and how to, know where their sense of self is in a safe manner. In other words, this is what you can do, and applauding you, acknowledging and validating your accomplishments as your own, not just as they're owned by the parent. So oftentimes this can then develop where the child then sacrifices their own needs for that of the parent's needs. So their needs go completely unrecognized, unmet, unwelcomed, and refused and rejected. So then part of the child then is going to feel unworthy, unlovable, undeserving of their needs. In other words, what's normal and natural then begins to be disidentified with. Just like a phantom limb. This is not really mine. This cannot be mine. And then the children don't understand then when needs of a similar kind or that, surround this are not met. And so they feel part of them is like a phantom self. An unlovable, or, that you should be discarding part of yourself. So, it can become very, it can develop a pathology within the child, particularly low self-esteem and really lack of identifying with their self. So they lose a sense of identity. Instead, they need to focus on other people, and they can then become very fearful of adults. In other words, here's another adult, a big person who is 4 feet taller than me, who once again is probably going to be like my parents, or I should fit it in and assimilate it in, meaning I'm going to fit in this authority figure into the same box or category as my parent, who wants me to dissociate or disidentify with part of myself, which is normal, natural, my emotions. So even though your emotions might be, completely positive, very gregarious, liking to be with children, liking to play games, liking to talk about math or social studies or science, or talk about whatever it is that you found natural interest in, 4-H, whatever it is that you found your joy and belonging in, the adult, because of this sort of denial of what's and shutting down your feelings, the child will then take that sort of dissociative experience into the other areas of their life and not feel that they're fully there or can fully participate. They have a phantom self, which is sort of, like a private self. Even at the childhood level, they feel that part of them cannot really all out participate and they're going to get in trouble. So they develop a fear-based mindset. Mindset meaning your attitude and how they look sort of at the world, how they look at opportunity, how they look at group settings, and their own, how they can approach things overall as sort of a global gestalt. Children tend to fit in what's known as gestalt, where they sort of fill in the missing pieces. In other words, because part of their own self was denied, that they then must perpetuate this denial themselves. They must then, follow their parents and then begin to shut out. They become part of the problem, keeping their own selves, in a suffered, down, repressed or suppressed state, which eventually it's going to need to come to the surface and breathe and sort of bubble through. And so a narcissist, they want you to appear, just, almost as a child, develop a false self. Which is very taxing and stressful and burdensome and confusing to a child to have to develop a false self. Children, when you're around them, they don't hold back. They make funny comments. They're just, they're spontaneous. They're not filtered. They're raw, and oftentimes this very aspect is what gives delight not only to the child but to the parents. And then when the parent is delighted, they will giggle and, tickle the child or say, "That's so funny, you're so cute, you're so sweet," and then hug you. And then you kind of get to live all through the stages of your childhood. It's, accepted. It's reinforced positively. The parent is then reflecting back to the child their sense of self, their I am. And they get to know that their innocence and their wholesomeness and their discovery, which is also known as industriousness, which means that they can pursue things and be productive and be sort of part of the, the little community where they're at in their childhood community or their school. And that this is, treated with positive regard. And then when it's rewarded, the child will then develop and continue to develop along those lines. So, but the parent, oftentimes who's narcissistic, isn't really concerned about that child's sense of self. They're not really, even though it seems like that's the natural role of a caregiver, they're not really making that a priority. The parent's needs are the priority. And yes, with any family, a parent is the authority. And it's balancing time, balancing budget, balancing their own career, their own need for downtime has to be figured in, but it should ultimately be balanced enough that the child, knows their place in the world. They get a feeling for their strengths. They get a feeling of what it is to learn and what it is to have discipline and, be able to be autonomy versus shame-based. And so if the child is not able to develop a sense of I am, meaning distinct and separate from their parents that can hold their own, then they learn sort of a shame-based model where part of them has to get locked away, that this is unfit for presentation. It's almost as if you're unfit for human interaction is when it gets very severe, especially in the psychopathic range, when it's very severe or malignant. And, there's a tremendous amount of brainwashing and gaslighting. particularly in the gaslighting of the child, is that of denial. Denial of the child's needs, denial of reflecting back to the child their positive sense of self, giving them a sense of basic safety and security. And a child will oftentimes want to secure their sense of safety and security, prior to, and that will override their own needs. But things can then run amok where a child will then, if they cannot relate to their parents and have that connection, then they'll find other places to look and make a connection, no matter where it is. They might be looking under their bed for a connection, and, out the window for connection. They might be looking to their neighbors for a connection. They might try to, create some sort of relationship with a teacher that is like, I'm your teacher, this is for your parents, so they, might just relate to trees rather than parents. They might relate to the moon rather than themselves. They might just look for anything. They might get caught up in other relationships in the neighborhood that might lead them astray. They're looking for that connection. And so if their need falls into the wrong hands or the wrong influences, then the children are very impressionable. They're very vulnerable. They need connection. And they're not able to determine, what is good and bad. If it's rebellious, that they sort of assimilate, this is, not that they're identifying that this is the bad crowd, but they might then found themselves with other wayward children or wayward, slightly older, who take them off astray, and they're not able to focus on that autonomy and that sense of self that is strong, secure, and that is able to carry over through many different settings. In other words, a foundational, ever-present part of you that is able to learn and withstand and adapt and adjust, that sort of inner level, that sort of, and so the narcissist, will deny, their needs and, make it seem as if it does not exist. And so, in other words, they'll just sort of look right through, act right through, behave right through their children. So their children oftentimes feel invisible. And, also, once again, because to a narcissist, there can sometimes be an envy of a child. It seems strange. Why would you envy a child, that you bring into the world? The whole goal is so that you can raise them up. And oftentimes for a lot of parents, their goal is so that you can surpass me, you can surpass us, you can, go and develop beyond us so that you can become, more professional or have, a better opportunity or a better lifestyle or a better chance at things or a better education, that you can take advantage of that. In other words, that we can help you grow and develop using our knowledge, using our wisdom, and add to you as a person. So, but this oftentimes is not the case with the narcissist. They're embroiled in their own issues. They're embroiled in their own emotional traumas. They can be alcoholic, where they're just not able to speak clearly to their children. The children, and then they don't have the sort of natural rhythm in a family. And then you can see these children oftentimes having trouble just communicating, the flow of speech, the words, even their words sounding clear. Oftentimes they may be not able to articulate the sounds because of the slurred sounds that their parents are always making. So these are their original mentors and templates and blueprints that the children build themselves, out of. And so they oftentimes will then get so used to needing to identify with authority for their needs that they become codependent or people-pleasing. And, looking up to others, but not feeling that they have a sense of self and that their role should just be that of support or, one of propping others up and not being able to have that sort of I am themselves. And the narcissist, oftentimes because they're they lack empathy. They don't get where the children are coming from. Oftentimes, to kind of keep them small and meek, once again, that they'll deny what and take away what you love, and even things that you're good at. They will say, don't spend your time with that. That's not going to help you. Again, because if it could sort of leak that there's problems in the family, or leak that there's problem with this narcissist parent, they're going to want to shut that down. And then oftentimes the child can then be used like a football or a baton between the parents. In other words, I gave this to the parents, I'm responsible for this, and then the narcissist parent wants to be righteous and sort of take credit for, raising the child in any sort of positive things, and then the other parent, even though they might have equally contributed, they're stating, they're going unacknowledged. So the other parent of the narcissist can also be suffering this sort of lack of validation and sense of I am. And so the self just sort of withers away. Your chance at life, it creates a big cognitive dissonance. The opportunity in life is not yours. It's sort of always going to be beyond your reach. It's going to be beyond your ability to communicate, beyond your ability to ask for help. Children of narcissists oftentimes, are afraid to ask for help because they feel that they're missing so much. They're ashamed, they're embarrassed. How did I, end up here? This does not make any sense, especially when they look outside and they see, that there's other children playing and laughing and they're not held up by the same issues. So this can push them further and further away from their trajectory of a healthy sense of self. So it becomes, a double bind. It becomes even more difficult to deal with the absence of a parent who's, absent emotionally, unavailable emotionally, not there, yet they've got a roof over their head, they've got a meal on their table, they've got a bed in their bedroom, but yet, the light's not on. They didn't pay the emotional bill, for the emotions to be supportive. So it can create a lot of cognitive dissonance for those children, feeling that they don't have a center. They have not interacted with their center out in life. Like they haven't lived as a whole person. They feel part of a person, half a woman, half a man, half a person, not fully developed, but missing, not knowing where to go or where to begin. And it's that I am, it's that identity of who you are, and then being able to have a vision of yourself, which usually the parents are the one responsible for holding the vision for the child. In other words, we're going to get you into football. We're going to get you into college. We're going to get you into cheerleading. We're going to get you into computer science. We're going, and so the parent is the one responsible for holding the positive image for the children and then keep the child on track. When that doesn't happen, then everything falls in the lap of the child to develop their sense of self, but they need, others, they need a healthy setting to be able to develop that and feel safe and, largely, not afraid of this sort of crippling aloneness or crippling lack of strength of I am, particularly with those significant family members. So they can have problems with authority or feeling that authority makes them nervous. You're going to find me out. There's this cognitive dissonance that holds them back. They want to do something, but they just keep forgetting to do the right thing. They can be disorganized with their time, their priorities. They don't know, what to pursue. They just, even the basic fundamentals, which is, don't worry about it. There's rudimentary information. Right now, we're in the information age. You can get whatever remedial education and even emotional education that you need, here, online. Whereas even, 5-10 years ago, this information was not made readily available. And oftentimes it's very difficult to develop this in 1-hour sessions with a therapist who doesn't really sort of understand. And so, there's this then cognitive dissonance that's further sort of indoctrinated into the child of a parent who's a narcissist. In other words, they learn a lot of cognitive dissonance, a display of words versus actions, and it does not compute. It does not make sense. It's like, if you love this person, you would not, neglect them. You would not either use physical force or emotional force or withholding. This would be communicated out and it would be resolved rather than just truncated. And so the child then can learn to sort of be hyper vigilant or just sort of hyper alert to others of authority, and sort of always sort of be testy of where they stand, and to see then they sort of test the universe. In other words, what will this adult do? What will that adult do? So they might find themselves getting into trouble, acting out, so that they can sort of have a surrogate parent to teach them the remedial skills. And but it's oftentimes done by default. In other words, if they get into trouble with the law, the police officer, the judicial system isn't really going to help to raise you, so they might find themselves in situations where they need to be raised up, but find themselves once again in a completely wrong setting for that challenge, and they end up, or going to military school or things of this nature, which can be very helpful, where there's then structure and then, protection. But you do need the structure, and you do need to embrace that inner child. And I mean, there's so much content that we can do on the inner child. I mean, that's just a whole world unto itself. And there's so many tools that I'm developing that can help that inner child to get to that level of playfulness, security, self-embracing, self-acceptance, and positive self-regard, where you develop that sort of internal dialogue to yourself. Hey, I've got you here. Being there for that inner child, allowing it to come out, to play, to color, to talk, to communicate, to be right where you're at. I mean, at that very base level, that needs to be lived and opened up and developed. Educare, which means to pull, to open up from within. You need to self-educate yourself on bringing your best out. No matter where you're at, no matter if you're in your 20s or 30s or your 60s, it does, that part of you doesn't really die, it can't really be extinguished. So it's getting to that and allowing that to flourish. So, we can do a lot of videos on championing that inner child. If this would be helpful. I didn't realize that this was such a pressing issue for a lot of our viewers. And so before we wrap up, realize that often also this gulf can feel, people can feel very estranged in their own family, in narcissistic or psychopathic family systems, where meaning the psychopath is running the show and oftentimes is very misunderstood by their child, and there's a lack of identification with themselves, and they might have a very strong identification with the psychopathic parent that keeps them very tightly trauma bonded. In other words, you become them an outlet for their desires. You could become an outlet for their transgression. You become an outlet for their trespassing, meaning boundary violation is, becomes a big issue in a psychopathic parent, where you don't really feel anything belongs to you. This is not my room. This is not my space. This is not my life. This is not my legs. You can feel sort of dissociated from your own being, because as a way of adapting and adjusting. And it's important then that you recover an ownership of your own body, your own physical needs, your need for food, sleep, shelter, and take responsibility and ownership of then, learning to be autonomous and providing for yourself in this way. No matter where you're at, you can learn responsibility. People oftentimes, look into and say, well, I just want to, I just can't, identify. I just want to be lazy. I want to be a slug on the wall. And people will say this, they feel so depressed. That's not truly what you want. If you truly want to, be a slug on the wall and not have any shelter, then try living under a bridge for a night or two and see if that's what you really want. Do you see what I'm saying? Do you really want that? Do you really want to be a bum? Do you really want to go on Skid Row and live on the street? If then try it for a couple days and see if that's what you really want. I mean, I'm challenging you, to listen to those words within and to see if that's just sort of a gut reaction from low self-esteem. And that's not the true you. That's the programmed you. That's the, conditioned you that's you've been taught to sort of dissociate from yourself. You've been taught by your parents. So the good news is that you can then relearn the positive self-valuing of yourself and respect for life. It's bigger than you. There's a big message here for you people who have been made to feel small, invisible, not worthy. And there's so much more to this, but we're going to wrap up. This is your buddy, Peace and Harmony. I hope the videos do help. Please share, please subscribe, and please join the new Peace and Harmony memberships for more great tools, videos, discussion, and support. Have a beautiful day.